Media Network proudly presents Having Courageous Conversations, where real talk dives deep. Each week we go beyond surface talk. We open our hearts, speak our truths, and dive into the stories that shape us. No scripts, no filters, just powerful, unforgettable conversations about life, purpose, healing, and truth. Join the conversation, because your voice belongs here. Please like, share, and subscribe. Check out our YouTube channel at Having Courageous Conversations or email us at yourshowyourvoice@gmail.com. Now, let's have a courageous conversation.
The views and opinions of our guest and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of New Thought Media Network, or any organization we may be affiliated with. Here at New Thought Media Network, we welcome freedom of speech and courageous conversations. There are many topics that can be difficult to navigate. Challenging the status quo and engaging in lively debate is important to expanding our understanding of one another, and life in general. Creating a peaceful world doesn't happen because no one disagrees, it happens from a willingness to understanding one another. In our programming, we strive to expand consciousness and assist people in creating remarkable lives. Your comments are welcome at info@ntmedia.org.
Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Jean.
I'm Marg. Cheryl, my dear, you're on mute.
Cheryl's muted.
2025, starting September, I'm on mute, like really? Oh my gosh, it's happening more to me lately than it's happened in the past.
Well, welcome everyone to Having Courageous Conversations, and our remarkable guest today is Joan Grundy, and we will have Marg share her bio.
Hi, Joan. You can certainly come on screen while I introduce you. So Joan is a retired Catholic school vice principal who continues to do talks and workshops in the areas of spirituality, wellness, and support for the 2SL LGBTQ+ youth. She identifies as a gay woman and has worked with gay and transgendered youth for many years in her roles as a high school teacher, chaplain, guidance counselor, and administrator. Joan is the author of an awesome book that I've read, and it's called A Deepening Life, which details her journey to live consciously and help others to do the same. And it's available on Amazon, and I bet that Deja will roll it around the screen at some point. Mm-hmm. Welcome, Joan.
Mm-hmm. Welcome, Joan.
It's good to be back with all of you.
Thank you for saying yes. Thank you for accepting the invitation.
Oh, quite honored to be asked back. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So, Joan, the title for our show today, Creating Safe Spaces for Queer and Trans Youth in a Time of Backlash.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you feel that we need to create safe spaces? What are you hearing or seeing that brings this statement up?
Right. I think like a lot of us in the North, seeing what's going on in the States right now and how it is, seeping into across the borders, is very concerning to me. It seems like we've, made so many gains in terms of supports for 2S LGBTQ youth and adults. And I can just feel a little bit like the image of the sand, you're wanting to go like this so it doesn't keep seeping through, the sand being a metaphor for all of the good supports and the evolution, even in our understandings. Really, really concerned about that, particularly for young people and the messaging that they're hearing, the things that they're witnessing, the fear that's being used to make those who are already very fearful more fearful. the perpetrators of that fear, knowing that that works, sadly, to immobilize people, and to scare those who are doing the supports from continuing to do them, fearing the cost that may happen. And, at first it was, I'd sit and watch, I watch MSNBC mainly, sometimes CNN. And at first it was, oh, what's going on? The craziness going on down there. And then it didn't take long to realize, the borders not made of concrete, that, those attitudes exist here. And the unearthing of those attitudes, on one hand, is a good thing because they exist. We need, before we can move them in better directions, we need to be able to see them, to name them, to claim them before we can reconcile and put further supports in place.
Yep.
But it almost seems like permission has been given for homophobia, transphobia, and yet again targeting some of the most marginalized people among us. In this case, for my core concern in regards to our discussion is to us LGBTQ kids. If you just think about, if you can think back to when you were a teenager and how much you already had to navigate and just growing up, in the world. And today's teens with the, social media, a lot of the pressures that I didn't have to deal with growing up, and I'm thankful I didn't have to grow up with. Even for your cisgender heterosexual teenager, it's not easy. And then you throw in the mix kids who are coming into awarenesses, sometimes earlier than even being a teenager, and realizing a number of people in the world around them, sometimes sadly including their families and their religious institutions, having to fear their rejection. And so the shame and the guilt and the repression from oppression that occurs, it's already too much. And then now you're having all of that's been fought long and hard for by a lot of people, straight and like allies and within the community itself. Feels like the earth is starting to shift and slip a little bit. And I find that frightening, particularly for youth. I'm 64. It frightens me even, in thinking about traveling anywhere where I could be identifiable, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine how vulnerable, and I have a lot of resources as a 64-year-old. I've lived a lot of life, learned a lot of coping strategies, how to deal in situations where I could be made unsafe emotionally and or physically. But, a 13, 14-year-old, it's very, very disconcerting, very, very concerning to me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and teens are so vulnerable already, like they're feeling so many mixed emotions, especially if they're fearful about coming out.
Yeah.
That makes it that much harder. My daughter's 20, and just watching her and her friends, we do a lot of conversations, and they're all feeling like they have some mental illness, they're broken. I'm just shaking my head going, why would you keep saying these things about yourself? Who cares if you are autistic or if you're ADHD, or it's just, you are you. So how do we instill in them that strength that we gather over years? How do we find a way to instill that in them today?
Right.
They're anxious, they're lonely, they're afraid, and they're trying to figure out what kind of world they're going to be left with.
Yeah, very true. And that's a really good point that you're making there, Barbara, too, is the world in general feels like the rug is shifting under all of us, just, the larger context.
Yeah.
And then you go into their worlds where they've got an extra layer of oppressive, thinking, and in some cases teachings coming out of a conservative, right-wing religious institutions. And what do they do with that? And I know when I spoke at the GSA conference at Bingman's this year, that's Okay to Be Me, sponsors and students from both public and Catholic boards go there. And this year I asked that no adults be in the room. And so some of the teachers really wanted to be part of the workshop. I felt badly because I think I did maybe offend a couple of them, and I didn't mean to, but I thought, you know what, I just want to have time to roll up my sleeves with these young people and give them their space, because although they, without exception, they all seemed to have very good rapport with the teachers that were in there. They were interacting with them quite comfortably. I wanted to compare what it would be like, because last year I allowed the teachers in, and this year I couldn't believe the difference when I could just say, okay, the door's closed. You know what? I don't have a really good memory. I'm 64, so you don't have to worry about me saying anything to your teachers. And I probably look like your grandmother, but I've earned the gray hair from sitting in the desk that you're sitting in, and wasn't able to come out till I was 33. And so I just started by saying how courageous and brave I felt that they were to be out, to at least to lesser degrees than than others, but to be at least be sitting there talking about the issue. And I was blown away. I really thought that I've been retired 10 years, and I thought the transition would be further along in terms of how they'd be feeling by now. And it was sad to me. I tried not to show it to them, but when I was driving home, I just kind of sat for a minute and went, damn, actually I said shit. I'll be honest. I'm like, after all the work and all the ground that we think we've moved forward, but these little God's wee ones there were still feeling so afraid to tell anyone more than one or two of their friends. They were still telling me stories. This one little trans kid, I just wanted to put him in my pocket and take him home. It was illegal. I might have. He was talking about, his family's, rejection of him. And I thought, I was hearing these stories for 3 decades. Why am I still, I'm not naive to think it's not still happening, but to have it be the majority of their experience, whether it was public or Catholic school, really saddened me, because I guess I just could be a little Pollyanna and like to think that we've moved a little bit more forward, with more visibility in the media, Hollywood, a lot more people coming out. So, that really reminded me that we can't make assumptions that they're, as you're saying, Barbara, a lot of them are not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to remind them of the fact that they were there, showed me that they had resilience and strength, and the fact that they're living and growing in a world where a number of people still are not getting them, don't understand them, let alone accept them and celebrate them. But the fact that they were there showed me that there is an inner strength they have that a lot of their peers do not have, and that moving forward, that is going to serve them well in the world, having that inner strength, that inner fortitude. And so that seemed to buoy them up a little bit. So that's a little bit in answer to your question, Barb, in terms of how do we kind of help them, just to point out that oftentimes, I know I did, even coming out at 33, I looked so much on the outside for validation on the inside. And that gets dangerous because it's not always there. So I was trying to work with them to say, look, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but you draw on and you feel proud of the fact that you probably have a lot more inner strength than a lot of people do at my age who haven't gone through the journey. You have been, in some ways, sadly, in some ways, forced to become more adult, more deepened, more mature in order to survive. So just trying to, they're kind of looking, like this, kind of like their little heads getting a little bigger, which was good, and trying to grow their hearts a little bit so that they know, and I also talked about drawing on the people who are in their court, because I said to them, I'm fiercely independent to my own demise at times. Don't be a Tony. Don't do that, because I'm unlearning that in my 60s. Don't do that. We need each other. There's nothing the matter with acknowledging we need each other. That's not weakness.
Right.
It's strength. And given what you're being asked to navigate in the world, you in particular need to draw on that, and that there is in fact strength in numbers, and little things can make a difference. And then I said, the Dalai Lama said, if you don't think doing little things can make a difference, you've never been in the room with a mosquito before.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Boy, is that the truth.
Joni, you actually did a segue into a question that I had. Actually, I have two questions. Of course, I do. But as a spiritual community, like I can speak to Unity Kitchener, and I know Barbara has a spiritual community too. What can we do to help support? You're saying to these youth, don't go it alone. So as a spiritual community, how can we support? How can we educate ourselves? And the other question I have is about labels. So let's do the spiritual community first.
Okay. Well, I'm looking at your face right now, and in the background is that beautiful pride flag, inclusive pride flag. And right away, when the screen came up earlier, when we were making sure we were good to go to say hi to these fine folks here, I see that flag come up. And as a gay woman, there is a sense of, I knew this was a safe space to begin with, but it's nice to see that, so just even signs, symbols in your gathering spaces can mean, a lot. And I think I maybe told the story, and I'm sorry if I'm repeating it from the last time that we talked, but I remember when I was a guidance counselor, and I literally had, honestly, it wasn't any bigger than that, a little rainbow flag, because we weren't allowed at the time in the Catholic school system to put much up, but I was being the little rebel that I was. And I had that just literally on sticker on my desk. And this mom came in, and I could see her keep looking down at it. And she was having struggles with her son, a lot of rebellion at home. Same was happening at school, which is why she was there. He was skipping a lot. His grades were plummeting. And she started to cry. And I, came around on my desk. I just kind of made gentle contact with her. And she pointed to the sticker. And I said, something about the sticker has touched a chord in you. And I know right now you're too emotional to talk. Can I put some things out for you to just nod if it's that? I said, does it have to do with something to do with, maybe being lesbian or gay? The nod. And then she was able to talk. And she says, we're pretty sure that our son is gay, but he's not come out to us. But we've wondered before. We're really worried. We don't know how to talk to him about this. So I thought, here is that little sticker, made her feel safe enough to even broach the issue with me. And I like using that example because even little things make a difference. So first of all, the visibility that you're a safe community and it's a safe space for them to be. The fact that even having spaces for them to gather because they can feel so alienated. Now with social media, a lot, it makes it better for some kids to be able to connect. Not always good sometimes. Older people preying on younger kids, like you have in the heterosexual community, can happen in chat rooms, etc. But one of the positives is you do have gay kids who are maybe living out in the country, not living in bigger cities where they can maybe more readily connect with other queer kids. So just having places where they can gather, because some of those kids don't have other people that they are connecting with, where they can have the feeling of, I'm not alone in this.
Yeah.
Other people are there for me. Having people within the community. I know in the Catholic school system, I still do some talks within the Waterloo Catholic Board, and I'm very grateful that they still welcome me to do those things 10 years out. But I keep saying the real need to have visibly out staff in those schools, because the reduction of suicidal ideation and completed suicides is nearing, I think it's something like 55 to 60% lower in schools where they have openly gay teachers. The kids knew about me. They just knew I couldn't be open about it until, the end, when it was like, you know what, I have a month to retire. What are they going to do? Fire me?
That's a huge percentage. That's huge.
Yeah.
It shows it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And when I go back in, I'm not anymore. I let my teaching certificate go this year. So I don't go back in as a VP or a principal anymore. But when I did, I said to the board, I'll go back in, but I'm not going back into a closet. I'm going in, not that I'm going to go on the announcements. It's you're a lesbian, principal in as a substitute, come in and say hello to the queer VP or principal. But I just said, I'm not going to go in the closet. And they said, we don't expect you to. So But it was interesting when I would go in the building, it was like teachers, okay, Joni's coming in next week for a few weeks to cover. They would line up all their little queer kids to introduce me to them. And I love that, but I always felt badly because I was there for a couple of weeks. You give the support you can, but I think it shouldn't be somebody who's just parachuting in. There should be people in the community who are feeling safe. They're there in the schools. We know they are. We're everywhere. We're everywhere. But, you know, to be able to come forward and just be who they are, that they have some healthy role models. Because so often they don't have adults that they can see have, you know, met with financial success, have met with emotional success, have met with, you know, we're having fun in life, who are joyful, who are not sitting on the end of their bed, you know, depressed every day. Like sometimes I worry about, you know, when I talk about the need for us to support kids and how it's difficult for them, I also want to talk about the resilience of these kids and what wonderful kids they are. A lot of times they're the most empathetic people you're going to meet, because an interesting perspective comes when you are living on the margins of a popular culture. You see outside in, whereas others see inside out. And sometimes, and most of the time, you see very different things outside in. And so they're wounded healers, a lot of them. And a lot of them, if you're doing social justice activities in the schools, they're all over because they know what it's like to be excluded. And so I think we really have to honor, back to your question, I'm really getting back to it here, Mark, about what can communities do. Like, welcome their voices. You don't have to know what they need all the time. Ask them. Bring some of them in. Invite them forward. What do you need from us? You know, what do you need from us? Because each group will probably have a different answer. You know, I often in the board felt like kind of the poster child for queerness or something, because I was quite vocal to most of the community about who I was. You know, probably a year or two after I came out, I was like, well, and I would tell this person and tell that person. And then soon I'd get these calls from people who were queer staff saying, you know, especially young ones, you know, I'm applying to school boards. Do you think I should apply to the Catholic board? You know, am I going to get fired if they find out who I am? I want to marry. I want to have a family, and those kinds of discussions, you know. But I was always conscious to say, I am one gay woman voice. You know, this is my perspective. Even here today with you, these are simply my perspectives from my lived experience. And so that's what's important, I think, to invite their voices forward. You know, some of them might listen to what I'm saying here and saying, yeah, no, that's not what I need at all. I need this. You know, and people get nervous because, you know, and I call it like the alphabet, the queer alphabet soup, you know, 2S, LGBTQ, you know, EIO, like, you know, so I feel for heterosexual, cis, you know, people that don't know what they mean, because I'm like, okay, are we adding a new letter this month? I don't mean that to demean that everybody has a space and should, but maybe we just need to say queer and gender something to tidy it up, right? But even my understanding of asexuality or pansexual, or you know, I have to learn transsexual. I happen to have a cousin who's trans. I've learned tons from him. I've learned tons from trans kids. But all along, you don't have to understand everything. All you have to understand is that people deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. And what they really need from you is a calm, caring ear, and to love them. You know, I talk to a lot of people who say, Joni, I'm just afraid I'm going to say the wrong thing. I said, please don't be afraid of that. You know, most people don't expect you to be perfect, just want to learn. And education, Marg, would be another point I would make, really important, because I'm finding, again, going back to the misinformation that gets tossed from the border to us, and we've had it in as well, of, you know, like trans kids, well, they're transitioning kids when they're 6. They're putting on hormones when they're 4. And no, they're not. You know, that stuff drives me insane when I hear crap on MSNBC from some of the Republican peoples in leadership. Like, what are they doing to our children? You know, it's a lengthy process. Psychologists are involved alongside the surgeons. I mean, I'm speaking from a Canadian context, but I think I could probably assume it would be fairly similar in the States, if not more lengthy, given we tend to be a little bit more progressive. So just the misinformation. So education, I think, is important for your community. Before you welcome those kids in, make sure that if you're flying that lovely flag and behind you in your gathering space, that it really is a safe space. Because people have critiqued me when I've spoken to some Catholic boards that aren't flying the flag yet, and they're hoping I'm going to come in and exercise some power to get their higher ups to fly the flag finally. And my first comment is, the flag should be a symbol of what already exists in your community. Do not fly it. If it's not actually a safe school or a safe spiritual community that's gathering, don't fly that flag, because it's a trap. It's a trap for a person, right? Symbols are as strong as what they represent. And if they're not really representing what it's showing that it represents, that is more dangerous to me than not flying it at all. That's how I feel. Now, I've had queer colleagues critique me on that and say, you know what, Joan, fake it till you make it. I said, I don't believe that. You've got to have your community. Again, you're always going to have outliers, but a critical mass of your community that's on board, so that when you do have those meetings at Unity where you say, we want to invite your youth into our safe space, that you assure it is going to be safe space for them. Really important.
That's very important. Well, we're at the halfway mark, so it's time for us to take a little.
I talk a lot.
But you have good things. You have a lot to say that is very thought-provoking. So really appreciate it. Thank you, Joan.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's great. It's great. So everybody, you're watching Having Courageous Conversations right here on the New Thought Media Network. And we're going to be back in just a minute. So don't go away, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe as well. We'll be right back.
The affiliated New Thought Network is pleased to present Deep Within, Mining Our Hidden Treasures, a hybrid spiritual retreat, October 6th through the 10th at Unity Village in Lee's Summit, Missouri, featuring our opening keynote address from Reverend Michelle Ezigwu, our Tuesday evening Raise the Roof experience with Reverend Dr. Martha Creek, special musical artist Ricky Byers. Wednesday features a morning keynote with Centers for Spiritual Living spiritual leader, Reverend Dr. Sonny Cantrell Smith, and evening keynotes from Reverend Dr. Robert Brzezinski and Reverend Tanya Beverly. Reverend Dr. Janine Burns rounds out our keynote speakers on Thursday morning. Visit www.antn.org for more details. Virtual and in-person registration is now available. We would love to see you there. ANTN, connecting the New Thought community through consciousness and love.
New Thought Media Network proudly presents It's All Love, Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Eastern, with Laura Mock as the presence of love, Maria Hartman, knowing truth, Wendy Wilson as the quality of presence, and Lara Brzezinski as the essence of joy. It's all love, a space where we open into the heart, tap into the soul's deep wisdom, and enter into the energy of love, truth, presence, and joy. It's all love, Wednesdays at 4 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Eastern.
Welcome back to Having Courageous Conversations. And boy, are we doing it today here with Joan.
Yeah,
Talking
we're
about
jumping
the
in.
2S LGBTQ plus community and how to navigate as a youth. Youth today have, youth have always had challenges given, the hormones, expectations of parents, the expectations of community as well, siblings. Everybody sort of has a idea of who you should be. Wouldn't it be cool if some parents said, "Hey, who are you? Let me find you in there."
Yeah,
And you do
Absolutely.
have parents who are, they're just really lovely, with their kids. And the other parents that struggle, they're lovely in their own ways too. I mean, a lot of times they're only working out of what they've been taught and raised with. And I know when I give workshops, I always start by saying, I don't judge you in here. I take you where you're at. I'm just really pleased that you're here. And I just hope maybe, you're willing to stretch yourself forward, even like that much is very worthwhile, and I share the fact that in my early 20s, I was incredibly homophobic. Now I look back, it was internalized homophobia, my way of trying to, you know,
Yeah.
keep the closet door closed, not
Mhm.
dealing with who I was. But I think that free the kind of look really, and it doesn't make you a bad person. But we it's detrimental to stay there for a group of people in our world, and it's particularly if it's your child. And there's a woman who, let's say it's like a friend, but like a familiar person who I've had some conversations with, and she has a trans daughter, and she says, I would rather have a happy trans daughter than a suicidal son, an unhappy suicidal son. And she used a really neat imagery. She said, you get these parenting books, and she said, and you kind of write your own book in your own mind when you meet your child about what their life might be like. And she said, and I needed to close that book, set it aside. And I said to my child, hopefully I can be part of you writing your own book. And I thought that was a really nice image.
yeah,
That's beautiful.
beautiful.
That's beautiful.
But the
And Mark,
security, sorry.
sorry, Mark had another question just before we went to break, and I was just wondering if she wants to ask it now.
It was more, it's a question and a statement. It's about labels. And I've had this conversation in a few arenas as of late. And I think there's a benefit and a disadvantage to a label. So for instance, I'm married to a woman, and I don't identify as a lesbian. And if somebody said you're a lesbian, I wouldn't be offended, but I would speak about it.
Right.
And transgendered people, I was acquaintances with a transgendered woman who no longer wanted to be identified as transgendered because she said, I'm a female. I've always
Right.
been a female. Now
Right.
my body matches
Right.
that.
Right.
And I'm a lesbian.
Right.
And so, like, I think the conversation has a really good, I think there's really good opportunity. I can't get it out in having the conversation and not assuming that somebody wants to be identified. And I think the label helps to bring up a conversation.
Right. Right. Mark, that's a really, really important part, that point that you're making. Yeah, we find them a little helpful to try to foster some understandings, but they're very limiting and they're not very real when you talk to people about their lived experience. Even like something as simple for me is I don't like the word lesbian. My mom would say, "Oh yeah, I know you're a lesbian." I think I like being gay. It just sounds more happy. But so I would never use the term lesbian to describe myself ever. So that's why it's important. As I was saying earlier, we don't have to understand all the letters and the nuances of the letters. Just ask somebody who they are, how they would like to be referred to. And, I think we put people in these little boxes because it makes us feel a little bit maybe more secure. I don't know. Some people, they get all wound up when they show gender fluidity, and they're just like, oh, I can't handle it. I can't handle it. I'm just getting my head around the whole gay thing and this trans thing. And now you're throwing this, pansexual stuff at me and gender fluid stuff at me, and I'm famous in my family, and there's a little one born. I'm out at the mall when my mom was alive, and my little niece who, presenting gender was female at birth, biological female, and somebody in Sears, that's how long this is going back, when they were still open in Brantford, said, oh, is that a little girl or a little boy? And I said, well, her presenting gender is female. My mother goes, she's a girl. I mean, you kind of maybe know me a little bit by now. I have a little bratty side to me. And that was the bratty side coming out, because I knew, of course, she was going to do a freak, but I thought I was going to have my little teachable moments with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, why do we need any labels? Why do we, if we're secure in who we are, how you identify should not bother me whatsoever. And that's why I would believe having panels when I was in the schools. Meet people. I forget who said, somebody said it's hard to hate up close. Like, meet people. I really saw the transition, in an hour-long class where initially, what did your parents think about it? Was it hard to come out? Then by the end, they were saying, oh, so you mentioned about track and field. Do you still do track and field? Are you still really good at that? Do you have any siblings? Like, they moved totally away from the whole gay or the trans focus and just talking to a person. And they go, sorry, miss, I know we're supposed to ask some of the questions we came up with about the gay thing. I'm like, no, you ask whatever you want. And secretly inside, I'm going, yes. We're moving in a right direction. It's an important anymore. Just a regular, normal person who happens to be gay. It's not the totality of their identity. Yet having said that, some people will say, well, Joan, why do you need to tell us you're gay? And I say, well, because I am. Like at golf, and somebody said, well, do you have a husband? Have you been married? And I said, well, I've been in a relationship, but it wasn't with a man because I'm gay. And then the other woman said, well, why do we need to know that? I said, because you just made the assumption I had a husband, and I'll never have a husband. No, I don't hate men. Your husband seemed lovely. Well, I must be honest. Those men where I want to look and say, well, if I'm not gay before, I'm going to choose to be now. I'm kind of a controlling fellow, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I diverge, as is normal. But yeah, those labels, just let people be who they are. And that's why education is so important, because really, I think a lot of people who still present with homophobia, transphobia, it's ignorance in the true sense of the word. And there's just a lot of it out there. When I see people on the news into the microphone, and I'm like, you know what? They just haven't been informed, and they're believing these sources out there. Well, if I heard that stuff and I thought it was true, I wouldn't want my kids to have books about trans people either. If they really are, worse and, changing people to go insane. I mean, the stuff you hear, it's just like, oh my goodness. And how would it feel as a trans person hearing all that stuff? Like talk about pound. Why labels at all? I agree, Mark.
I like to say ignorance, right? Ignorance causes fear.
Yeah.
And fear causes harm.
Yes.
So yeah. And we fear what we don't know.
Yes. So true. So true. And I know there's a lot of teachers who wanted to do more work to support all kids, whether there's, diversity with race. They just, didn't feel the comfort level because they didn't feel they had the competency and the confidence.
Yeah.
So that's why I really think education can really, really help. Really help.
I agree. Yeah.
No matter what community.
I think identity should be part of the curriculum, and not just about gay, queer, transgender, but just about identity, and everybody's identity is okay because that's who they are. Right. So really accepting and respecting people for who they are.
Yes.
And learning to recognize that, and not just be, like you said, assume a certain way of being,
Right.
because that might be the majority or whatever.
And that identity can change throughout life too.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. And what bothers me a lot is putting, God as your ammo too, using God and using sacred scriptures, Christian or otherwise, to thump people.
Yeah.
And, the shame and the guilt and, the conservative, like it's just, it's really, really scary to me to hear. And you know what, when I was involved just recently with the Waterloo Catholic, when they had a core group of trustees who are very, very ultra conservative Catholic, I would argue not really truly Catholic in the sense of what, sound Catholicism even is today. So I was involved with, showing up for the board meeting, standing in the lines in the rain and all of that. And one of your questions you sent to me was about hope. And that's what gave me tremendous hope. I mean, in the day when I was there, maybe there might have been 10 people brave coming out, because knowing that, the TVs would be there and I'm going to be seen, they're going to think I'm gay because I'm here supporting, the flag, blah, blah, blah. I mean, around the block, there was staff. Staff from custodial to EAs to principals to retired folk to Father Toby Collins. I definitely want to give a shout out to that man. He's the pastor of St. Mary's, handing out donuts to the crowd. And then he was a delegate the last night. And he got up and advocated for that flag to keep flying. And it was that whole experience. I don't know whether I had a bit of, to be honest, post-traumatic stress, but going through that for a month and a half with that community and standing in those lines and hearing what some of those trustees were calling us faithless, the world's lost God, and clearly you have too. And I thought, ouch, excuse me, you don't know me. And these kids, and I was looking over and seeing those kids hearing that, and one leaving in tears with the mom, thankfully, the mom there with her, with arm around the shoulder, walking out. And it was so hard for me because they said, if anyone speaks out or makes noise or grunts or does anything, they will kick everybody out. And so that was about the only thing that kept me, I'll be honest, that kept my Irish temper under control, because it got brutal at points. And then to have Father Toby stand up in support, I had to fight sobbing, because what that would have meant for me as a Catholic teacher, to have had a priest get up with collar on at a microphone at a board meeting that was public and say what he said. And I was able, thankfully, to thank him afterwards. And he was extremely humble and said, well, I've watched people like you do those kinds of things. But I give him, that took a lot of courage. And so there's hope, but more of that needs to happen. More of that needs to happen, that people from within that are in official leadership say enough is enough. This is not about issues. We're not talking about gay people and trans people. We are talking about people. Issues, I should say. Trans issues or gay issues. They're not issues. Behind those issues are human beings like me and like those kids. So quit making these comments about, well, the trans people and the gay people. This is us. So you're talking to us and you're telling us we're faithless, and using scripture out of context to do that, right? And then, so I was getting really angry. I was getting really sad. And then I went to the place of, okay, how can I find any compassion? And I thought, what must it be like to live in their world, to live the rigidity, the moral certitudes? Either you measure up or you're out of the pool, just go through life. And I didn't see a lot of joy in them when they talked about their faith. And then you had these young kids, and you had a trans teacher from one of our Catholic schools get up. And I know this teacher really, really well, accompanied her a little bit on the front end of her journey to come out to the board and begin to live and step into her truth. She hates public speaking. She never wanted to be a poster child for anything, let alone a poster adult. But because it was important, she was a delegate and she knocked it out of the park. Her lived witness was amazing. So that to me is hopeful. And these kids, the student trustees were the wisdom in the group for the most part. They were saying, I was taught about Jesus. Jesus loves all. Where does it say that Jesus thinks it's okay to call some people less than just because of who they are? And I thought, you know what? I felt really proud to have been a Catholic educator. And for the Catholic educators that remain, they're doing a really good job. Those kids
got it. They got the spirit of the law. They got what compassion really means. And they weren't afraid to name it, which my generation, I think, I'll speak for myself. I was too busy looking to kind of kowtow to authority, kind of been raised that way. The priest, oh yeah, the priest, the sister, oh, you know. Now I respect people because they've earned my respect, not because they're wearing a collar or anything else, a cross on their lapel. I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I just mean there's been real danger for trusting people that that are not, some of them not trustworthy, and how they make us feel. So I just kind of wanted to add that in and make sure we got to the whole place, because I am a person that still sees more goodness in the world, even in this area, than negative, and that believes, you know, was it Margaret Mead, the anthropologist, you know, the little drop of water, you know, that the only way change really does move is from the grassroots level, and it only takes a few people to get that moving. And the flag rose again this year because a number of us advocated for that and prayed about it and banded together. And it wasn't an easy fight, and it wasn't easy to sit there and listen to what was being spewed in the name of God. It was just so disturbing to me. I thought, is that the God you really pray to? I can't believe in a God that sees certain people as, you know, not worthy enough. Like in the, you know, in the beginning, male and female created them, you know, and it was good, except for those gay and trans people, or those black people, or those, you know, just like whatever you want to add on to their list. And I just see so much of that in the States these days. And it's just, I call it the creepy Christian. It gives me the creeps.
Yeah, it really is questionable when you think, you know, you're calling yourself a Christian and you're hating. It doesn't sit. It doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, a Christian in my mind is someone who follows the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Right. Right. And not perfect. In no way am I perfect at all. I don't want to pretend to be perfect. And I'm coming across pretty judgy. But you know what? I'm all right with that in this context, because that kind of activity, your rights stop where mine start. And that kind of, you know, verbiage and actions that they're doing to vulnerable people, I don't mind judging that. It's wrong. And I would want to be called out if I was doing things that were against people's soulfulness and reaching their fullness. And Jesus, I've come that you might have life to the full. That's not fullness of life. That's thwarting life. Yeah.
And I don't quite understand how the Bible or the teachings of Jesus got so misunderstood. Or maybe it's because they just haven't studied it at all.
Well, and they're believing how it's been interpreted. I think when we're in, like we were saying earlier, you know, the world is in such flux. I think we were saying that off camera. And Reginald Bibby, who's a Canadian sociologist, I can't believe he's 80 now. He's reading his writings in his 50s. And he said that when the world starts to get more tumultuous and confusing, people just swarm to fundamentalist religions. And so it makes sense to me in some ways, sociologically, from his perspective, if you put that to modern day, boy, aren't we in a flux time now. And so don't have me have to search out my own meaning in life. Don't ask me to ask questions of my faith. Just give me the answer, you know, that certitude, give me that clarity, because it's so hard to, you know, walk through the goop and all of the quagmire that can happen with faith that I'm actually in process now of doing. And yeah, it'd be a lot easier to just, here you go on your plate. Here's your faith, Joni, you know. Oh, thank you. And just repeat it. You know, I think it was Mark Twain said God, and it's exclusive language, so pardon that. But I think he was the one that said God created man in his own image, and man, being a gentleman, returned the favor. So when you're talking, right? And haven't we done that? You know, in some ways, I do apologize for the exclusive language. In other ways, I don't, because, you know, historically, perhaps hysterically, sometimes it has been men that have translated all of this to us, and it's time for her story, right? Our herstory.
I love that. Yeah.
And I've been praying with the women mystics, and that's been very helpful, because they're offering me more of the relational aspect of faith and relationship with God versus the legalistic, the dogmatic. I mean, I'd moved away from that decades ago, but it's just seeping in deeper, that's really what I want to be about. It is relationship and intimacy with God. I'm tired of all of the stuff. I'm not saying that the ritual wasn't important and I needed some of that stuff to take me to where I am. But like you were saying earlier, Marg, about identity, it can shift and change. And faith is dynamic too. It's not a noun, it's a verb. It shifts. And so, searching for a relationship with God and deepening it at 64 can be a little unsettling, but I'm willing to go there because I need to go there. I'm not going to stay in an infantile understanding of faith, the Santa Claus God. I need this, I need that. When I don't get it, I take my toys and go home, presuming that Santa left you some. And so I like God on my own terms. When God jumped through my hoops,
Yeah.
And then now that some things have happened in my life, it's like, what you talking about, God? Right? And so
book 2 is coming out. Is that what I'm hearing? Book 2 is coming out. Is that what I'm hearing?
You know what? Not coming out, but I'm giving some thought to from a deepening life to a searching life. I'm thinking.
I love that. Yeah. And what I wanted to say, Joan, is, you mentioned at 64, you're doing this. I think a lot of us are. And I think that that's part of life in a way. We go through all these experiences, whether what we call good or bad. In hindsight, I think as we age, we can see more, give more meaning to what it is that we thought was good or bad.
Right.
And I think that takes us deeper into exploring who we are, where we came from, where we're going.
Right.
And so that's part of our belief system.
Right.
And I want to say evolving into that.
Right. And learning things, having to look at your own shadow, look at stuff within yourself. And I talked earlier about that fierce independence, and I've had that, and I'm at a place where it's sort of like, hey, God, and I really do believe in the community of saints. I call them my circle of love, those that have gone before me, that know me, praying to them, asking their help, getting to the place of, I keep coming back to this place. I need help forward from this, and for the first time, just understanding what mercy really means, what grace really means, what falling to your knees really means. And looking at my spiritual arrogance in the face, looking my ego in the face and saying, you know what? You're not all that in a bag of chips, Grundy, So, and then that balance of, that reckoning, a real reckoning, really, but also the self-forgiveness and being gentle with self that I'm not really good at, and I'm working on, because you have an impression even of yourself and your capabilities, and then you do something you think, well, that's not really authentically me, how did that happen? Did someone come in and inhabit my heart and my head for a month, but in saying no, and then looking at, as Jung would, it's not an either or, you're not, sinner or saint, you're both. It's a both and, not an either or. And so there's lots percolating within me, and I'm trying not to be, because it could be disconcerting. I always could just rely on God's there, and all of a sudden I'm like, is God still there? And realizing, you just need to grow up in your understanding of God. God's always been steady, but you're just moving to a new stage, and maybe back revisiting the other one again. Like, I think it spirals rather than does this too, depending on what experience. Yeah.
As you're talking, I'm thinking, when we talk about God, the word God has so many different meanings to so many different people. I think that's a show in itself, right? What does God mean to you?
Right.
We could have some really deep conversations around that.
Because I used to refer to God as Sophia, Greek word for wisdom, holy wisdom in Hebrew scriptures. And that was really important to me as I was trying to move out of the patriarchal context that I grew up in within Catholicism. And then, but now I'm at a place where maybe it's that whole label thing again, Marg, where it's like, no, God's not male or female. I mean,
Mhm.
God doesn't have gender. We have essence of everything. So now I'm just kind of like mystery. The only word I can think of are all, everything, mystery. You know, I tend to kind of go back to the God name because that's just so deeply embedded in who I am. But I don't generally, when I pray, say, "Dear God." I'll just say all, mystery, holy wisdom, this metaphor.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's interesting when I read my book 10 years ago, right? That's now been 10 years. I can't believe it. And there's parts of it. I was asked at a book club one time, is there stuff you take out? I said, no, I wouldn't take anything out because that's where I was at. But I was so clear about everything happens for a reason. And now I would say, well, you know, I think things happen and we can find meaning and reason in them to move us forward. But is somebody there kind of pulling the string? I think those poor little kids in Gaza. Like, if we're going to go with that understanding, you got to go across the board with it. You know, okay, if someone's a person in my life for a reason, are these little kids like fighting for their lives and, you know, dying very painful deaths, starving for a reason? Is that really a God? I think so. It's like, no, no.
And we're down to our last 5 minutes, if you can believe it. 5 minutes, 4 minutes. 4 minutes. So we always like to end with, what do you think the most important thing shared today is? And I'm going to go around the room and ask everybody. But Joan, you start. What is one thing people should take away from this? What do you think?
One thing. I'd say grace. Just to be, you know, have grace for yourself, have grace for people that you don't understand, have grace enough to keep your heart open enough to move yourself to new understandings, deepen knowledge, which will bring you to fuller life with, I believe, the numinous, if you believe in one, and other people, you know. And I think it's grace that does that, having the humility to say, you know what, I'm not all that in a bag of chips. I can learn from people. And the way I do that is having that humility and grace to sometimes shift my ego to make room for people.
Beautiful. I love that. Thank you, Joan. Cheryl, how about you?
I think, you know, something that Joan said about, you know, not being issues, or and even Mark about labels, that we are people. Let's just look at each other as people and love and accept each other, learn to understand each other, be more curious about each other, you know, and rather go that route than push people away and judge them.
Exactly. How about you, Mark? What is your take?
Well, ask the conversation, ask the question, and invite the conversation. What do you need? I really appreciated, Joni, you saying that, you know, asking somebody, what do you need? So inviting the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. For
Barbara.
me again, yeah, well, for me again, it's labels. I have a challenge with labels right across the board, whether it's I have this mental illness or I'm this. When was the last time somebody stood up and said, oh, and by the way, I'm heterosexual? Nobody says that. But it's so important that those who are recognize that they're not the only ones. And then I'd kind of question whether they are or not. I think there's a lot more gay people or bisexual people or whatever. There's a whole bunch of different things now than there is just straight heterosexual. So I think we've started on a really good conversation here.
Good.
And where shall we take it next? Thank you, Joan.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you again for inviting me back. It's nice to be with all of you. And I can't see the folks out there who may watch it moving forward, but God bless you all. And stay your path. Integrity is the only sane path, you know?
Yeah.
It truly is. It truly is. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Cheryl. And I am so grateful to be back here with all of you. And you've been watching Having Courageous Conversations, and we're going to continue to do this every single week here on the New Thought Media Network at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And I invite you to come, bring your friends, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And by the way, ntmedia.org is a charitable organization, and you can support that organization with your donations and tithes as well. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Just remember, you can find us on our website. Watch the show again.
Thanks, Mom. Bye, everyone.
Stay on, Joni.
Thank you.